Okay, today we're going to show you how to take a hub bearing off. This is a 2000 Dodge Dakota, so four-wheel drive, and they'll be a little different if it's a two-wheel drive, but taking it off and putting it on is the same thing. The only thing you won't have to do is remove a center axle here for the four-wheel drive. But what you'll do is, first thing you're going to do, and it's pretty much the same for GMC, Ford, and every vehicle. Hub bearings are simple. A hub bearing is a whole bearing with bolts on the back that you loosen and take the whole bearing out. Some bearings you press on. You have to find out whether your vehicle is a press-on bearing. If that's the case, then you have to take this whole thing off, and then you have to take it to a machine shop and have a new bearing pressed onto it. But these, you don't have to do that. So first thing we do, on this particular vehicle, it's an Allen screw that comes off of the rotors. And what you're going to want to do, maybe, is you're going to want to put a screwdriver in here and pry the rotor forward just a little, enough to loosen it up. I've already done this, and I've already loosened the bolts. And then loosen these bolts off. And of course, with this one, we got this this piece right here that's going to have to be removed. And then we'll pop this whole thing off. As a matter of fact, I won't even have to do that. I'll just pop this off right here. Okay, there we go. And then it slides right out. Now, not all calibers have spring-loaded piece on them like this. Okay, now we got the caliber off. Okay, now we got this off. Okay, now of course you're gonna have to take your tire off, and to do that, you're going to have to jack it up, and never work under a vehicle with just a hydraulic jack. It's dangerous. You always use supports, an extra jack to hold the vehicle up while you're working on it. Never take a chance. Okay, tire or wheel, of course. Now, on some vehicles, you're going to have to remove this caliber mount. Okay, it has two more big bolts back there to take this off. On this one, you don't have to. All I'm going to have to do is slide the rotor off. No big deal. Put it to the side. With other vehicles, this whole piece will have to come off because it comes out and curves down and cuts down in front of the rotor where you can't get it off. But this particular one's a little bit easier. But that's no big deal either. You know, it's usually it's going to be a 15 to an 18 millimeter bolt to take that caliber mount off, and you're going to have something with some extra leverage a lot of times to break them loose. Maybe not always. Okay, this particular vehicle, on this center hub, you have a CV axle for the four-wheel drive. Okay, this bolt has to be broken loose. If you can break it loose before you pull the wheel the vehicle off the ground, so the wheel doesn't spin, it'll hold it still, because this usually has a lot of torque on it. If not, break this bolt loose. Before you take the brakes apart, have somebody hold the brake, and you can break this bolt loose. And it's going to take, and a lot of times it's going to take at least a half-inch drive. You're not going to be able to do it with a 3/8 drive most of the time. It'll break a 3/8 drive. And it takes quite a bit of torque to get it off of there, quite a bit of leverage. So it either needs to be sitting on the ground, or make sure you have your brakes still on here, and break it loose before you take your brakes apart. Okay, the first thing to remember is when you're doing this, just be patient. It takes patience. If for some reason you start getting aggravated, just take a break, go get you a snack or something to drink, or something, and then come back out. You have to be patient. All right, and make sure that you're also safe. And the right tools helps if you have the right sockets and all. Now, I broke the center axle nut loose. We'll take that off. Okay, and now on some vehicles, you're not going to have that center axle nut, and that's going to make your workload a little bit less. Okay, and this caliber right here, you probably, I have it secure sitting here, but if you don't have a place to set it, then you need to get some ties, some of them zip ties, and tie it off somewhere, because you don't want the caliber to fall and you mess up your brake line. So make sure this caliber is secure. Okay, and once you take the axle nut off, if you have one with an axle nut, most of the time, see, it'll just push out. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I got bolts back here in the back, and it looks like they're about 15 millimeter bolts. There's 3 of them, and you're going to have to use a 1/2 inch drive most of the time to break these loose because they're torqued on there. They got a lot of torque on them. There's 3 of them on this one. Some of them there'll be 4. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to pull this hub bearing out. Okay, now this hub has 3 bolts holding it on. I've already got 2 of them out, and I've got this one loose. I'm going to loosen it up the rest of the way. Okay, that's it. Now some of them have 4 bolts holding them in. Now I had to break this loose with a 1/2 inch drive, a 1/2 inch drive ratchet, or actually a 1/2 inch drive bar, because they were tight. And then I just took them off with a 15 millimeter 3/8 drive ratchet. Okay, this is a bolt. That's the last one. Now I got the bolt off the center, and some of them you may have to tap a little with a hammer, but this one's going to come right off. I'm going to take it right off the axle. There we go. There's the axle, and there's the hub. And it's making a noise. Definitely. It whines when I'm driving. That's how I know it's bad. I've had them come apart, seen them come apart before. Okay, and that's the old one. Now I'm getting ready to put the new one on. Okay, now, I got the hub bearing off. Alright, we're getting ready to put the new one on. But before you put the new hub bearing on, you need to take a wire brush and clean this off really good. This surface needs to be clean when you get ready to mount it. So it'll mount without any debris between the bearing and this surface right here. Okay, so make sure you clean it well. And then when you put it back on, when you're putting them back on, there's a certain amount of torque that you're supposed to use. You can have a torque wrench and do it that way. I've been doing it for a while, so normally I don't torque it. I just tighten it. You don't want to over tighten it with a whole bunch of leverage, but you want to get it good and tight, because you remember this holds your wheel on. So best thing to do is use your torque wrench and get the proper amount of torque from the book, or you can Google it or something to torque it to the right specs. But just make sure you clean this surface before you put the new bearing on. Okay, now we're putting the hub back on. It's turned dark on us, but it's alright. Just make sure you get the spindle in there. I mean, it's not going to go on unless you get it lined up anyway. You just run the spindle through there from the axle, and then put the hub right back up here, mount it to the surface, and then put 3 bolts in it. And then when you tighten your bolts, if you have 4 bolts, whatever, you tighten them a little bit at a time. You don't tighten one all the way and then go to another one. You tighten one a little, go across, snug it up a little, and then go from bolt to bolt, and until eventually you get them all tight. Okay, I got the bolts started. Run them all up till they stop. If yours are harder to run up by hand, then just use your ratchet. Now sometimes the ratchet may not fit in here. They may be a little more difficult to get to. I've done them where I've had to push the CB axle back some, or the axle back some, to get the ratchet on them. I've even done some where I've had to pull it apart a little bit more, like maybe the tie rod in or something, to get it to move out. But okay, now I got them all snugged up, so now I'm going to tighten them gradual, one at a time, and then I'm going to torque them down. Okay, now we're going to put the axle nut on. I put these 3 bolts in, torqued them down, they're good and tight. Now you may not have an axle, so this won't be anything that you'll have to do here. That don't go on there. Gotta find the nut. What did I do with it? Okay, putting the axle nut on. That piece I stuck on there first. I wasn't supposed to. That was accidental. Thought I had the nut in my hand. Alright. You're going to tighten this axle nut down. And you torque it down to whatever the torque specifications are. And if you don't have that, then just make sure you get it tight. Don't use a lot of leverage and super tighten it, because you can ruin the bearing if you tighten these too much. But you do need to get them tight enough. You need to tighten them pretty good. And then once it's tight, I'm just going to show you. I'm getting ready to tighten it. Then you'll put this on, and you'll put this on, and you'll tighten it down. And of course, you'll run the Carter key through it, and then all the way through it, and then bend it out on the ends. All right, but I got to take it off and tighten the nut, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay, before I actually tighten the axle nut, I'm going to put the rotor back on. And then I'm going to put the caliper back on. A little while ago, I was calling this a rotor. I didn't mean to. This is the rotor. This is the caliper. Okay, we're going to put the caliper back on. We're going to put the brakes back together first. Now, this isn't a hard job. It can be a little tedious sometimes, but it's not hard. But whatever you do, be patient, because you don't want to mess anything up. Wind up not having brakes or something. So be patient and make sure that you put it back together the way you took it apart. If you have to, just go back on the video and look and see. Now, when you tighten the caliper bolts, don't put a ratchet on it. You get them started with your hand first, because you don't want to put them in there crooked and cross thread them. Mess up the bolts or mess up your caliper mount, and then you have a mess on your hands. Just be patient. Patience is the key. Get them started and turn them quite a bit. Make sure that you get them started good with your hand. That way they're not cross-threaded. And then once you get it started good with your hand, then put the ratchet on it and tighten it down. Okay, we're tightening the caliper down. Now make sure after you get the caliper tight, and probably be better before you didn't do anything else, to go in there and pump your brake. Because when I put the screwdriver in there and pried it a little, it pushed the piston and the caliper back in. So your brakes will most likely go to the floor. But you just pump them a couple times and they'll come right back out. And your brakes will be fine. But don't forget, because you take off and your brake pedal goes to the floor, you may run into something. Okay, I pumped the brake, got the caliper back out. Now I'm putting this spring-loaded device on. I forgot what it's called. And now your vehicle may not have this, so you won't have to worry about it. Just make sure you get it. Uh-oh, I got it. Just make sure you get it hooked in there. You have to play with it for a minute, but you'll get it. Patience is the key. Okay, I pried it up and pushed it in, and it popped in there. Okay, let's see. Let me make sure I got it locked. Not quite. Okay, we got the brake caliper back on. We pumped the brakes. They went to the floor the first time. We got bearing bolts tight in the back. We got, now I have to tighten up the axle nut and put the wheel back on, and that's it. And of course, once you tighten the axle nut up, make sure you put the Carter key in. If you have an axle, if you don't have an axle, then it's not something you're even going to have to mess with. It'll be a little less work. It'll be a little different coming off in the back maybe, but they're basically pretty much the same. There may be a couple out there that could be quite a bit different. I've done some that are different, but This isn't too bad. Even with axle, it's not a bad, and it's not a bad job. It's better than having to take off the bearings that you have to take to a machine shop and get pressed off and pressed on. And that's how you replace a hub bearing on a 2000 Dodge Dakota and some other vehicles. Thanks for watching.